A maze is a tour puzzle in the form of a complex branching passage through which the solver must find a route. The pathways and walls in a maze are fixed, and puzzles in which the walls and paths can change during the game are categorized as tour puzzles. The Cretan labyrinth is the oldest known maze. Technically, the maze is distinguished from the labyrinth, which is a single through route with twists and turns but without branches, and is not designed to be as difficult to navigate. In everyday speech, both maze and labyrinth denote a complex and confusing series of pathways. Maze construction. Mazes have been built with walls and rooms, with hedges, turf, corn stalks, hay bales, books, paving stones of contrasting colors or designs, and brick, or in fields of crops such as corn or, indeed, maize. Mazes can be very large. They are usually only kept for one growing season, so they can be different every year, and are promoted as seasonal tourist attractions. Indoors, mirror mazes are another form of maze, in which many of the apparent pathways are imaginary routes seen through multiple reflections in mirrors. Another type of maze consists of a set of rooms linked by doors. Players enter at one spot, and exit at another, or the idea may be to reach a certain spot in the maze. Mazes can also be printed or drawn on paper to be followed by a pencil or fingertip. Generating mazes. Maze generation is the act of designing the layout of passages and walls within a maze. There are many different approaches to generating mazes, with various maze generation algorithms for building them either by hand or automatically by computer. There are two main mechanisms used to generate mazes. In carving passages, one marks out the network of available routes. In building a maze by adding walls, one lays out a set of obstructions within an open area. Most mazes drawn on paper are done by drawing the walls, with the spaces in between the markings composing the passages. Solving mazes. Maze solving is the act of finding a route through the maze from the start to finish. Some maze-solving methods are designed to be used inside the maze by a traveler with no prior knowledge of the maze, whereas others are designed to be used by a person or computer program that can see the whole maze at once. The mathematician Leonhard Euler was one of the first to analyze plane mazes mathematically, and in doing so made the first significant contributions to the branch of mathematics known as topology. Mazes containing no loops are known as standard, or perfect mazes, and are equivalent to a tree in graph theory. Thus many maze-solving algorithms are closely related to graph theory. Intuitively, if one pulled and stretched out the paths in the maze in the proper way, the result could be made to resemble a tree. Mazes in psychology experiments. Mazes are often used in psychology experiments to study spatial navigation and learning. Such experiments typically use rats or mice. Examples are Barnes maze, Morris water maze, Oasis maze, radial arm maze, elevated plus maze, T-maze. Other types of mazes. Ball in a maze puzzles, dexterity puzzles which involve navigating a ball through a maze or labyrinth. Block maze, a maze in which the player must complete or clear the maze pathway by positioning blocks. Blocks may slide into place or be added. Linear or railroad maze, a maze in which the paths are laid out like a railroad with switches and crossovers. Solvers are constrained to moving only forward. Often, a railroad maze will have a single track for entrance and exit. Logic mazes, these are like standard mazes except they use rules other than don't cross the lines to restrict motion. Loops and traps maze, a maze that features one-way doors. The doors can lead to the correct path or create traps that divert you from the correct path and lead you to the starting point. The player may not return through a door through which has entered, so dead ends may be created. The path is a series of loops interrupted by doors. Through the use of reciprocal doors, the correct path can intersect the incorrect path on a single plane. A graphical variant of this maze type is an arrow maze. Mazes in higher dimensions, it is possible for a maze to have 3 or more dimensions. A maze with bridges is 3-dimensional, and some natural cave systems are 3-dimensional mazes. The computer game Descent uses fully 3-dimensional mazes. Any maze can be mapped into a higher dimension without changing its topology. Number maze, a maze in which numbers are used to determine jumps that form a pathway, allowing the maze to crisscross itself many times. Picture maze, a standard maze that forms a picture when solved. Turf mazes and maze mazes, a pattern like a long rope folded up, without any junctions or crossings. Gallery. Publications about mazes. Numerous mazes of different kinds have been drawn, painted, published in books and periodicals, used in advertising, in software, and sold as art. In the 1970s there occurred a publishing maze craze in which numerous books, and some magazines, were commercially available in nationwide outlets and devoted exclusively to mazes of a complexity that was able to challenge adults as well as children. Some of the best-selling books in the 1970s and early 1980s included those produced by Vladimir Kozyakin, Rick and Glory Brightfield, Dave Phillips, Larry Evans, and Greg Bright. Kozyakin's works were predominantly of the standard two-dimensional trace a line between the walls variety. The works of the Brightfields had a similar two-dimensional form but used a variety of graphics-oriented path-obscuring techniques. Although the routing was comparable to or simpler than Kozyakin's mazes, the Brightfields' mazes did not allow the various pathway options to be discerned easily by the roving eye as it glanced about. Greg Bright's works went beyond the standard published forms of the time by including weave mazes in which illustrated pathways can cross over and under each other. Bright's works also offered examples of extremely complex patterns of routing and optical illusions for the solver to work through. What Bright termed mutually accessible centers, also called braid mazes, allowed a proliferation of paths flowing in spiral patterns from a central nexus and, rather than relying on dead ends to hinder progress, instead relied on an overabundance of pathway choices. Rather than have a single solution to the maze, Bright's routing often offered multiple equally valid routes from start to finish, with no loss of complexity or diminishment of solver difficulties, because the result was that it became difficult for a solver to definitively rule out a particular pathway as unproductive. Some of Bright's innovative mazes had no dead ends, although some clearly had looping sections that would cause careless explorers to keep looping back again and again to pathways they had already traveled. The books of Larry Evans focused on 3D structures, often with realistic perspective and architectural themes, and Bernard Myers produced similar illustrations. Both Greg Bright and Dave Phillips published maze books in which the sides of pages could be crossed over and in which holes could allow the pathways to cross from one page to another, and one side of a page to the other, thus enhancing the 3D routing capacity of 2D printed illustrations. Adrian Fisher is both the most prolific contemporary author on mazes, and also one of the leading maze designers. His book The Amazing Book of Mazes contains examples and photographs of numerous methods of maze construction, several of which have been pioneered by Fisher. The Art of the Maze contains a substantial history of the subject, whilst Mazes and Labyrinths is a useful introduction to the subject. A recent book by Galen Wadzinski offers formalized rules for more recent innovations that involve single-directional pathways, 3D simulating illustrations, key and ordered stop mazes in which items must be collected or visited in particular orders to add to the difficulties of routing. Although these innovations are not all entirely new with Wadzinski, the book marks a significant advancement in published maze puzzles, offering expansions on the traditional puzzles that seem to have been fully informed by various video game innovations and designs, and adds new levels of challenge and complexity in both the design and the goals offered to the puzzle solver in a printed format. Mazes open to the public, Asia, Dubai, Gardens Shopping Mall, Dubai, Japan, Hikimi no Miro, Masuda, Shimane, Japan, Kodama no Mori, Kyoto, Nagano, Japan, Kyodi Miro Palladium, Nika, Tokiji, Japan, Sendai Highland, Sendai, Miyagi, Japan, Shirahama Energy Land, Shirahama, Wakayama, Japan, Pacific, Hawaii, Dole Pineapple Plantation. New Zealand, Amazing Maze and Maze, Europe, Denmark, Labyrinthia, Silkeborg, Samsa Labyrinthen, Germany, Hortus Vitalis a Euro dei Rigaton, Bad Salzwaflum, Italy, Castello di Massino, Caravino 10010, Torino, Italia, Porcena's Maze, Chiusi, Tuscany, Villa Pisani, Stra, near Venice, The Labyrinth of Franco Maria Ricci at Fontaine-Lato, Netherlands, Water Labyrinth, Nijmegen, designed by Klaus van der Locht, 1981, Doolhof Ulo, designed by Daniel Marot, based on the design for Hampton Court Maze, Portugal, Parque do Arnedo, Ponte de Lima, District of Viana do Castelo, Parque de São João do Roque, District of Porto, Forest Reserve of Pinal. Da Paz, São João do Miguel Island, Azores, Spain, Labirinto del Camino de Santiago, Parque del Labyrinth, Barcelona, Parque de la Torre Blanca, Esplugs de Llobregat, UK, Blakehouse Craft Centre, Braintree, Essex, England, Canfunnet Country Park, Northern Ireland. A hedge maze in the shape of Northern Ireland and winner of 1985 Designer Maze Competition. Castlewellan, Northern Ireland, world's largest permanent hedge maze, Glendogan Garden, Cornwall. A cherry laurel hedge maze created in 1833. Hampton Court Maze. A famous historic maze in the Palace Gardens. Hever Castle Maze, Hever, Kent. Yew Tree Maze and a Splashing Water Maze, Yew Hill Maze, Shuford, Bedfordshire, England, Norwich Cathedral, Norfolk, England. A labyrinth in the Cloister Garth. Laid to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of H.M. Queen Elizabeth II in 2002. Richings Park Amazing Maze, Richings Park, near Heathrow, England, Saltwell Park, Gateshead, Tyne and Wear, England. A yew tree maze restored to its original condition in 2005 and opened to the public during park opening hours. Somerleyton Hall, Suffolk, England. A yew hedge maze designed and planted in 1846 by William Nesfield. Clevedon House originally laid out in 1894 and reopened to the public in 2011, consisting of 1,100 yew trees, North America. USA, Tanglewood Music Center Hedge Maze, Lenox and Stockbridge, Massachusetts, South America, Brazil, Labyrinto Verde, Nova Petra Cubed Polis, see also. References. Further reading. External links, Briefing Room CNN's Barry Neild offers escape routes, Labyrinth Society, Times Online, Britain's Best Mazes.